Okay, gentle listener, we got a question I kind of like a lot because it's a historical question and it's a tough lesson that I learned. It comes from Aaron. In your article, "What is elite?" Which it's better that article comes from 2001 when someone asked me to give a workshop on elite athletes. And I spent way too much time researching that short little piece. You mentioned 4 points for being an elite athlete. The last one, the athlete uses high levels of strength training before the competitive periods. Save for lifters, as strength goes down, performance should improve. For many of you, and don't take this wrong, who don't have the experience and the background, that seems wrong. But for the rest of us who've done the big lifts and done the big throws, it makes sense. I was wondering if you would take a deeper dive into this point, as I think it is a very important one with more details behind the concept. I like the fact that you think this is important, Aaron. This actually comes from my friend John Powell. Now, John Powell was a world record holder in the discus throw, and I worked at his discus camp for 25 years. His strength coach was Richard Marks. And Richard Marks was kind of famous as an Olympic lifter. He was a guy who could snatch 385 and then clean and jerk 385. He was just like an amazing lifter. I think in training he snatched over 400. He might have been the first American to snatch 400. But Richard Marks was this celebrated strength coach who had this interesting ability to combine Olympic lifting, powerlifting, and bodybuilding movements into logical 3-day-a-week programs that just kept building on themselves, so that especially discus throwers and shot putters found themselves really competing at a high level with just some very basic training. Richard Marks doesn't get enough credit because one of the things, there were so many great throwers at the time, but he had this ability to tell somebody, you're going to have a good weekend. You're going to have a great weekend in the discus this week. And they say, how do you know? And he'd say, well, you were here 6 weeks ago and now we've been relaxing, tapering you off, and your body is ready to explode. Aaron, it comes down to this. You can only chase so many rabbits. I always take people back to June 1991. That's the month where I snatched 314 in a meet, clean 402 and missed a jerk, threw the shot my lifetime best around 52, threw the discus 184 with a howling left-hander's win. If we'd had a better discus setup that day, I would have gone 210 or longer. That 184 was a beautiful throw, and it went to 184 feet and then crashed straight down. And then right after that, I had about 6 to 8 weeks of just blah. Well, what happened, folks, is that I was trying to chase 2 rabbits at once. And Marx taught us, and this is before I learned this lesson. Okay, I learned this lesson later, sadly. What Marx is trying to teach us is that our central nervous system can only handle so much. Charlie Francis, the great Canadian sprint coach, read his book Speed Trap, you'll get the same idea. Read Marty Gallagher's blog, you'll get the same feedback. Is we can only ask the central nervous system to do so many things. And weightlifting in the gym really stresses you out. So as you consciously decide to lighten the load, it's weird at first. I mean, if you're snatching 285 in training and then the workout says to go to 245, you look at that like, are you kidding me? There's nothing on the bar. If you've been benching 405 and it says to bench 315, you're like, I just feel like I'm warming up. Well, what happens is that as you consciously reduce load, you can almost feel yourself expanding. Now, the weakness of this idea is this. The day before the nationals, you'll go into the weight room and you'll feel so good that you'll make the best lifts of your life for multiple reps and leave the national championships in the weight room and not on the field. So you can only ask the body to adapt at a high level to so many things. I've got Pat Flynn's book right here, how to be better at almost everything. There is great value in being a generalist, but if you want the discus to go far, you have to be specific to it. So you can only ask your body to do so many things at a high level. So you have to consciously back off in the weight room to allow your other adaptions as a thrower, jumper, swimmer, kayaker, whatever it is, to leap forward. It is, Aaron, I got to tell you, I've learned a lot of lessons in my life, some good and some bad. This was the hardest for me because as all strength athletes, I got addicted to the numbers in the weight room. I always thought the weight room meant that I was throwing farther, and it's not true. It's not true. One final thing. After most throwers retire, they tend to come back to the field 3 months, 4 months, 5 months after they haven't done a thing. And they see their buddies and they pick up the implement, warm up, and very often get to 90 to 95% of their best marks. And that's why so many great throwers have found that after they retire and come back, I always joke I've retired 17 times. Once you stop lifting, you clear out all that nonsense in your head and you come back and your numbers in the weight room will be not very good at all. You'll be basically at the level of a typical gym lifter, and yet you throw or you jump really far. And that's the great insight many throws coaches have come to when they realize that the weight room sometimes gets in the way of superior performance. One final little story for you. Glenn Passy, who died about a year ago, who was my hero in the discus, he told me one time that he did things different. He was told that to be an elite discus thrower, you needed to clean and press body weight, snatch body weight, and clean and jerk about 20 pounds more. So in the fall, he would get his lifts up to clean and press body weight, snatch body weight, clean and jerk 20 pounds more, and then he would stop lifting. A couple of weeks later, he'd come into the gym and test those lifts. If he couldn't do them, he would train a few days to get them back up. And that's how he trained. He kept getting himself back up that level he was told he needed to be. And when I listened to him, of course, I couldn't hear him at first because that was something that is so out of all of our vision of how you're supposed to train. But now I look back on what he said and I realize what a genius he was. Because what his point was, when you're strong enough, you're strong enough. And if you keep pounding away in the weight room, very quickly, your body stops adapting and accommodating to being a great thrower, jumper, kayaker, and starts becoming a weightlifter again. And that's just too many rabbits to chase.